I have won. In this position, I just played the move bishop to c5, which is a big blunder. As you're going to find out in the course of this video, you'll see why this move was so bad and how I needed to fight for my life in this particular game. So the first thing I wanted to show you is some really good news. As you can see here, I've managed to finish first and I've ended on 21 points out of 22. A massive achievement. Last year I got 20 out of 22, which meant I did not qualify, but this time round I've managed to get a near perfect score. Did drop one game, as you saw in the video. If you've not seen that recap video though, please make sure you check it out. Now, in that last recap video, I was alluding to a particular game that I was not doing particularly well in, and well, you're about to see why I was not doing very well in that particular game and how I was able to fight out of that position. Okay, so here was that particular game. So the game started with him playing knight to f3, and here I played a very pugnacious move, the move g5. Now this move is introducing us to what is known as the Hirschstrom Gambit. A very dubious gambit, if I'm being honest with you. Something I would maybe play in maybe bullet or blitz, and not necessarily in the world of correspondence chess. But I've been seeing some interesting games with this particular line, in particular in correspondence play, and I thought it'd be quite a fun little shock weapon to try and throw at my opponent. Well, here my opponent played knight takes on g5, which is the best move. You're taking the pawn, and well, really black has not got a huge amount of compensation for it. Here I played the move e5. This just has the simple threat of recapturing this knight here. Now, there's a ton of theory on this particular. I say a ton of theory, not really that much theory, but there is some interesting lines that white can play. Now, the best move, in my opinion, is the move d5, and this has a simple idea of defending the knights but also attacking a pawn in the centre. And well, play can get a little bit very crazy. Black gets a very open king side, so he has to kind of play some very precise moves to not get blown off the board. Meanwhile, white has to be careful not to fall too far behind in development. However, there are some other moves that are pretty good. I generally, when I play this line, I often see this line, which is interesting, as it allows black to push forward in the centre. And, well, you get kind of like a reverse Alekhines defence. However, black is playing without this pawn on g7, which I think is interesting in any case. So, going back to our position, here though my opponent played his first mistake, e4. Terrible move. Can't really say much about this move, why it's so bad. But here you can hopefully see that black can just capture this with his queen. So really not a great move in this position. Now, after this, he developed his knight to c3. I'm going to just turn this off because I think it's really annoying with all the arrows around there. And at this position, well, I'm playing daily chess and I have 24 hours to make my move. Now, for whatever reason, I think I was playing this particular game at work, if I remember correctly. And, well, I didn't perhaps make the best move possible. So in this position, I make the blunder of bishop to c5. I just simply thought that I wanted to get my bishop developed and maybe, it might be a bit cheeky, but maybe go for like a quick attack on his king maybe. Maybe he wouldn't notice. He'd already blundered a knight, so I thought that perhaps this was a good idea. But perhaps I should have given more respect to my opponent, as now he finds a fantastic move. See if you can solve it. It is white to move and get back in this position and actually give himself plus 4.3 on the engine, which is just a crushing amount of material here. So the move that white played here is the very strong d4, a powerful move that not only hits the bishop but opens up this queen to this threat. Now, my best move perhaps probably should have been something like maybe queen to e7, and at least after takes I can regain some of that material. But obviously, as I said, I was playing this particular move at work, wasn't really thinking too much about my position, and here I made a horrendous mistake. I captured here on d4. Oh, what a big mistake, as I now allow him to capture my queen on g5. So already I'm in a terrible position. I'm down 6 points in material. But the game goes on and, well, I'm able to win this. Now, I'm going to give you some practical advice. When you're down materially, there's a few things you need to be aware of. Number one, make sure that you are avoiding any equal trades. Why do I say this? Well, if you start trading off all of your pieces, that leaves you less pieces to attack with, but also as you go into an endgame, you're just going to have a worse and worse position. So avoid trades, number one. Number two, I think if that's, let's do number two here. Number two, I think it's really important that you try and keep things as complicated as possible. So try and go for those threats, try and look for those tactics, and really make the position as murky as you can. If you have complications, it will maybe your opponent might make a mistake. I can't guarantee it, but at least you can then try and go for these little swindles here and there to try and win the position. And I guess if there's anything else I want to say here, I guess one of the things you'll see in a bit, try and keep the position closed. Now the reason why it's good to keep the position closed is if the position starts to open up massively, the person who's got more pieces will have a bigger edge because their pieces are much more active and can go through your position very quickly. But again, these all depend on various factors, so all of these principles that I just mentioned now could all depend. And this might explain why I decided to now capture here on c3. Now, as I say, you shouldn't do these trades. But in this position, I was a little bit worried about the knight starting to come onto c7 and causing me a bit of problems. However, having taken it out the way, I at least create a tiny weakness that I could maybe go for to try and gain back some of the material that I lost. Now I play the move d6. I thought this was a nice solid move. I'm looking to maybe get my bishop, maybe my knight out. Here he plays the move queen to d5, which is a very aggressive move. I now develop my knight. He puts his bishop onto b5. So at the very least, my opponent's playing quite well in trying to look for trades with his pieces. However, here I play the move bishop to d7. I knew that if he captured here, I could at least maybe capture back with either the bishop or the pawn and get a tempi on the queen. I guess it's not much, but at the very least, I could try and go for moves that are trying to give me maybe some footing back in this position. However, in this position, after d7, he now played the move f4. He's at least guarding his bishop. And actually, from the very least, this isn't such a bad move, is that he's looking to try and open up the position and crack open my king position. Well, here, I didn't want to exchange off. If I took here, this is just opening things up. He could maybe start pushing through, or maybe just take back with the bishop, and it starts to get a little bit scary for me because my king can still no longer castle. So I play the move f6, at the very least creating a threat on the bishop. Well, at this point, my opponent makes a mistake. Here he captures here on c6. Not a good move. By doing this, it allows me to take with b takes on c6, and notice this. Both his bishop and his queen are under attack. Well, there's not much he can do. In this position, he plays queen to d2, getting it out the way. I now capture him on g5. He takes back. He now pushes an f5, which I really didn't understand at the time. I don't know why he didn't just take here on g5. That just seemed like a logical move. But by playing the move f5, well, the position is now going to be a bit closed. He's no longer got a pawn break against this e4 pawn. And this makes it quite easy, or easier I should say, to defend this position. Now I put my pawn onto h6. I'm at the very least now defending this pawn that was being attacked by the queen. h3 is played, knight to f6, queen to d3, and now I put my king onto e7. I've actually completed my development here, and well, I thought to myself that maybe my king would be safer in the centre. At the very least, it's surrounded by a couple pieces and a few pawns, and now I've at least connected my rooks. I thought this would be better than the very drafty looking castles on the king's side. Here my opponent castled. I put my rook onto the open file, and a to b1. Again, just some little beginnery things. You don't want to take this rook, as this is just going to give him a whole open file to work with. Here I just played pawn to a5. The engine doesn't really like this too much, but I wasn't too sure what to really do in this position. I thought maybe to not worsen my position, I could have maybe moved a rook, for example, and then maybe encourage him to trade, but at the very least, I didn't have to do that. Here I just play a5. He took, I took back. g4 is played. Again, this is in my favour, as the position is staying closed for the time being. Now my rook came to b5. Again, the engine doesn't really like this too much, but I'm at least trying to keep things closed up on the king side. He now plays a4, hitting the rook, and I now go to b2, at least trying to create some threats here and maybe come here. Well, this idea starts to work a little bit. Now he ties his rook onto c1, and here I play the move c5. I'm looking to maybe get my bishop to this square, start creating some threats against this pawn, and even start picking up this pawn on a4. Well, he comes to a6, I put my rook to a2. He captures, I capture back, I at least get a pawn back. And after he takes here, I start to kind of think that maybe my luck's starting to get a little bit better in this game, as now I can be able to capture one of his central pawns. And actually, out of the pawns that white has, it's not super clear how he is going to create some threats in this position. You know, I'm hitting this pawn now, that comes with a potential threat. And yeah, I'm just not really seeing how he can do it. However, there was a very strong move that a white could have gone for. Well, in this position, he does technically go for it with rook to d1. A great move, as it now hits this pawn on d6. And my knight here has to stay where it is. If it now starts coming to c3, which looks like a good move, he can now capture and pick up this bishop. So I've got to be very careful. However, again, I go back to my other principle, try and create complications, try and create threats. I put my rook onto a2, now hitting this pawn again. And, well, my opponent could have found something a bit better here, but he now ties his rook back to c1. This is really good for me, as basically my opponent is having to defend rather than attack me here. I took here on c3. There was a good move that I was a bit worried about he might play, which was f6 here, which is now deflects the king. When I was thinking about just putting my king here, it gets a little bit murky after f7. Notice if I take this pawn, he'll just pick up my bishop, and I'm just in a terrible position. Although, having said that, I wonder if I'll be able to play this position out. I'm still, I'm only down on one pawn, but this queen is rampaging through my position. You can start capturing a couple pawns and being, oh, this move wouldn't work actually because of this move. That's quite funny. So yeah, that move wouldn't work. So yeah, it's still not a clear position for me. White has still got an advantage even at this point, even though it looks like I'm coming back into the game. Well, at this position now, my opponent makes a big blunder. He now puts his queen onto b7, a terrible move, as this now allows me to throw in the check. King came to g2, a pretty terrible move, and now a capture here on c1. I'm back in the game. You can see that evaluation bar has shifted back to 0, so it looks as though I'm coming back here. Well, he puts his queen onto b1, a good move. Didn't see this as it now forks both my knight and my rook. I thought to myself, well, my rook is more valuable, so I need to keep this on the board for the time being. So I first threw in this check, and after his king came to h2, I found a fantastic move that kept me in the position. See if you can find it. This is a great tactic, a great use of complications to keep this position as a sort of, I guess, a win, well, at least better for me, shall I say. It was the move bishop to e4, a brilliant move. The reason why it's so good is I'm now hitting this pawn on c2, and after the move queen takes on c1, here we go, rook takes on c2, a fantastic fork, picking up both the queen and the bishop. The queen took back and I took here, and oh my goodness, I managed to win this particular game. How I managed to do it, considering at this point here it looked all lost. You can see that evaluation part. It gives it plus 9.8, 9.9 it's going up to. Oh my goodness. But at the end of it, you can see I come out victorious. So, okay, my opponent didn't play the best moves in this particular game. And even up to move 26, this is still a totally winning position for white here. But I kept things interesting, I tried to keep things close, and I used my pieces as effectively as I could to win this game. Hope you enjoyed this. I think the big message from this is never give up in any of your games. Even in this position, okay, I totally outranked my opponent, but I kept it interesting, I kept it complicated, and I was able to become victorious in this game. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, make sure you leave a like. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.